出的书叫做《Citizen of No Place》，其实就说我说无国界之人，然后它是一个很有趣的，用你们如果还找不到的话，20几年之前 publish 的，就是说用一个画的风格在讲跟建筑跟生活有关的故事。那再来他的赖老师的作品有被纽约的 MoMA 现代主义现代美术馆收藏，有被 San Francisco 的MoMA 收藏，有被芝加哥 Art Institute， 还有在阿贝手这些我们在艺术界算是极高端的这些场域被收藏。那我其实是非常荣幸，然后因为老师今年正好在南加大做访问学生，那有机会认识 Jimenez， 那也感谢，就是说赖老师小的时候是在台湾，但是很早就到加拿大美加发展的，就说赖老师愿意说在学习的空档也回来看看同学们的发展。那希望未来我们有机会有更多的机会跟赖老师学习，有更多的交流这样。那我们现在就请赖老师。
OK， 谢谢大家。我等一下开始讲 lecture 的时候会switch 成英文。不过我现在先介绍一下我自己，用中文。我有一些朋友都跟我讲说，听我讲中文很痛苦，sorry。不过我是在台湾出生，然后小学的时候，离开台湾，所以已经离开台湾三十几年了，30几年了，我现在对快要34、35年了，不过就是很高兴能够有机会，就是来到台科大，就是做评审，然后就了解现在台湾建筑教育的状况那样，然后在这3天之后，我用我的看法跟大家就是报告一下，就是我觉得对我的观点啊，台湾的现在的，因为你们的表现让我感到很高兴，就是这是不知道30年过去，结果现在台湾的年轻人水准这么高，然后让我觉得未来很有希望那样，所以谢谢大家那样，OK 谢谢。那我可能就很抱歉，就是我的 lecture 如果整个 lecture 用这种中文讲，你们可能会听到明天，所以我要 switch 转成英文 ，OK， 所以希望大家见谅，希望大家见谅 ，OK。Okay, so my name is Jimenez Lai. I have a small practice called Bureau Spectacular. It's based in Los Angeles. Recently, about 4 months ago, we finally redesigned our website, which I have to say, if you don't have a website, I just always underestimated the psychological factor of not having a website. And now that this is organized, I feel much better. So I highly encourage this process. And today I'll be walking through a number of projects that are within the website, of course, if you have a chance to visit. And the structure of today's talk, I know I have roughly an hour window. I'll subdivide it into 4 segments. First, I'll be introducing myself more properly. I'll talk about some of my past work. I'll also use this opportunity to talk about, let's just say, the thesis of my work, right? By the way, if you're doing thesis, just know that thesis, hopefully, it's not really a big deal. It's not a big deal because you have if it's something that you're passionate about, you have the rest of your life to work on it. So don't worry about it. Don't worry too much about it. Okay. So that's the first segment, introduction. I'll transition next into talking about my recent work. By recent, I mean since 2022, right? So in the last 2 years or so, recent work. I have a bunch of future work lined up already. Not all, in fact, most of the future work is not buildings, and I'll talk about them too. By the way, the recent work and the future work, they're both organized in a 5+1 format. 5 buildings plus 1 installation in the recent work. award, 5 books and 1 documentary in the future work segment, so 5+1. I'll end today's talk with an epilogue where I'll just tell a short story. As I mentioned, I left Taiwan in the early 1990s, 1991. I went to Toronto, Canada, where I went to school eventually for architecture school. Lucky for me, the architecture school I went to was a relatively new school. The program was new. I think I was the 5th generation of the school. In other words, it was not super organized at the time, right? So you might think that's a problem when your teachers are not super organized. But as a matter of fact, for me and many of my colleagues, my classmates, it became a platform for experimentation. A platform for experimentation, including things like this. I built a super large one-to-one model during school. This was me. I'm the person with the hat. During this time, I guess, throughout my studies, I also had a chance to take some time off. I took a bunch of time off. For example, there was a scholarship that allowed people to study Frank Lloyd Wright, and when I got this scholarship, I decided to join Taliesin, the School of Architecture founded by Frank Lloyd Wright. So I actually studied at that school for almost a year, where we got to do a lot of hands-on things, do some site construction, on-site construction, one-to-one. I mean, I'm still not super handy with carpentry or construction, but because of this experience, I'm not that bad when I communicate with contractors these days, right? After this, I went to work for an artist in the Netherlands. I was in Rotterdam, on the pier of Rotterdam. Rotterdam, as you know, is one of the busiest ports in the world. Certainly the busiest port in Europe. And I lived in one of these shipping containers working for an artist. The artist's name is Joep van Lieshout, Atelier van Lieshout. Why I was drawn to him was because in a public lecture, I saw a lecture by Joep van Lieshout, who described an art project of his where he declared independence from the Kingdom of Netherlands as an art project, right? I thought that was so funny. He made his own passport, his own currency, his own military, and because he owned this pier, he also turned a bunch of his shipping containers into homes. And he made this public declaration, artists unite, come join this commune. So at the time, in my early 20s, I was really susceptible to these kinds of things. So I said, yes, may I please join you? So I stayed here for not like about a year, and the first project I worked on was this sculpture called the Rectum Bar. It's a functioning bar that serves alcohol in an anatomically correct way, where we had to sculpt a rectum, and the brown bags that are that the kids are jumping on as couches, are inside the rectum. I joined OMA in New York after this, later OMA Rotterdam, and I started teaching when I was really young. I think I was 27 or 28 at the time at the Ohio State University. So it's been now 17, 18 years now of teaching. But through this journey of working, teaching, and let's say continuing on the path of architectural experimentation, right? Experimental architecture. I found through this journey in the output of my body of work, I've seen maybe 2 visible tracks, okay? 2 visible tracks. And it's these 2 visible tracks, I would say this is a matter of mediums. Track number 1, cartoons about architecture, where the medium is cartoon, right? Comics, right? I draw comics, so the medium is a comic book, but the subject matter is architecture, right? All right. Track 2, cartoonish architecture. I'm using architectural means to think about plans, elevations, 0-degree axon, but the sensibility is cartoonish. All right, once again, cartoons about architecture and cartoonish architecture. So for the rest of this presentation, if you bear this in mind, you can see either or through this process, right? Either cartoons about architecture or cartoonish architecture. And it is a matter of mediums. And very lucky for me, as Professor Chu mentioned, by producing all this work, I was able to be collected by the Art Institute of Chicago, LACMA. This, by the way, was a lamp, let's say a cartoonish lamp, right? SF MoMA and the Museum of Modern Art, right? Some of these projects were, I guess all 4 of them were collected in the last 8 years or so. I was also part of the last MoMA PS1 competition groups. This competition is no longer, right? MoMA PS1 was a platform for, again, experimentation where people are invited to construct an installation for the summer at MoMA PS1, which is no more. I've also been very lucky to have been recognized by the Architectural League of New York, where I won the Architectural League Prize for Young Architects, and I was recognized by the Art Basel as Designer of the Future. And of course, I had a chance to represent Taiwan at the Venice Biennale about 10 years ago, which I'm very proud of for having had this opportunity. And none of this would have been possible without, again, cartoons of architecture or cartoonish architecture. By the way, this image here, this drawing here, is all that remains of my thesis. I can't find any of my work anymore. All of the hard drives degraded over time. So think about how you want to preserve your work. But in a way, it also doesn't matter. You do let your thesis go at some point. But my thesis project, when I was in school, was a work of science fiction about teleportation, about life and architecture after teleportation, right? If you can teleport, do you need airports or doors or corridors, or seaports, roads, infrastructure? Like, if none of that matters, if everything is a destination, what then? And what happens to time zone or geography, space, privacy, and all these things? What happens to personal space? Ideas about connection, desires. So to talk about, maybe to split hair within the aspects of storytelling and narrative writing, right? As I mentioned, since I do work on cartoons about architecture, I would further subdivide the types of stories I write into 2 types. One, as I just mentioned, science fiction. Science fiction is something that all of you are probably familiar with, but for instance, one of the first works of science fiction I wrote was when I visited Taliesin. This image right here, this human over there, that was Frank Lloyd Wright, right? This is Frank Lloyd Wright when he was still alive. And what he's sitting on is this gigantic model of Broadacre City. And I'm sure maybe some of you have had to learn about Broadacre City. Effectively, what the Broadacre City was Frank Lloyd Wright's idea about a kind of low-density American life, where every family gets 1 acre of land, and they, become self-sufficient by growing their own food and so forth. This was a reaction by Wright after having seen an early 20th century effect of high-density living in places like New York, where it was infested with disease and gunk. And he thought, perhaps in his mind, an infinite resource that the United States had was land, right? Infinite resource, where he was projecting that with every family an acre, this infinite resource could be distributed fairly. But the first time I drove through the United States, I realized his vision did come through, right? It came true in the form of suburbia. This low-density life, which once again is an expansive type of urbanism, suburbanism, low-density urbanism. I thought to myself, you have to pardon the resolution of this image. I did this maybe almost 20 years ago. I was thinking, what if we were to package because when I showed up to Taliesin, this model was still there, so I was able to see this model in person. I was thinking, what if we were to package this model and shoot it into space as a spaceship? And if it travels near the speed of light for, let's say, 10,000 years before we arrive at the next destination of a habitable planet, what then, right? What then is the spaceship itself becomes an envelope upon which the urbanism can no longer expand, right? It becomes an enclosed urbanism, meaning it's a city inside of a building, right? In this case. And I was thinking, what life must be like inside of the spaceship. What happens to gravity? There's no gravity, so plan, elevation, ceiling plan, all of which is plan. Maybe routine changes, language changes, maybe even time changes, because here on Earth we have 24 hours, but and our human bodies use 24 hours, but in a spaceship like this, that wouldn't matter. We would have to forcibly maintain it. And what I was able to pull out of this work of science fiction, I entered a competition. This would have been, again, many years ago. My first built work came out of this work of science fiction. At a gallery in Los Angeles, they were asking for an entry under the prompt, gravity defiance, right? Gravity defiance. And I was thinking, if plan, elevation, ceiling plan, each had an opportunity to be planned, we obliterate that relationship with the ground, rendering the distinction of every drawing, every typology of the orthographic drawing into simply orthographic drawings, right? As an act of gravity defiance. So here we constructed a space where it rotated at once an hour. It means that every surface, every 15 minutes, one of the surfaces would become planned, since it rotated at once an hour. It also meant every 7.5 minutes, you got to experience life on the oblique. This, I guess, narrative of science fiction inside of the spaceship didn't end just, with gravity, right? So one of the members of the spaceship found himself returning to Earth. He returns to Earth to meet this creature, and the creature says, "Oh yeah, you space warped and you've been gone for 10,000 years. Your culture no longer exists." And this person down here, he's a archaeologist from the future, from 10,000 years, a future archaeologist from 10,000 years later, whose anthropological thesis is the average taste of the early 21st century. And so here, he's wondering about the average taste of the early 21st century, and meeting a live specimen is so important as an anthropologist. And he says, "Oh, I have so many questions for you. First question, was architecture this or that?" Because according to every academic record, architecture was this. However, according to every archaeological dig, architecture was that. Seemingly, there's no direct relationship between what goes on in academic discussions versus construction. And so the future archaeologist says, so to conclude my first question, could you tell me what may have caused this divergence? So the guy says, "Oh no, everyone's dead. I guess I don't have to pay my taxes anymore. I should redeem my Costco points." But the science fiction of spaceship, teleportation, space warp, and advancing far into the future, just like the previous rotating room, I also had an opportunity to construct something based on the short stories, right? In 2018-2019, the Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art in Seoul, South Korea, had a project. They invited a group of international architects and artists to come to the palace of the last king of Korea to construct a installation as to commemorate the centennial anniversary of his death, right? The last king of Korea died in 1919, who had a vision of a future cosmopolitan Korea where international artists would come and play a role in the Korean society. So it was really truly quite an honor to be invited by them to construct something on his palace, right, of the dead king. And I was thinking, archaeology, the thing about archaeology and our relationship with time is that we dig, right? Like this is the direction of time. When every year or something, a little bit of sediment over time. For example, the Roman Forum, which is roughly 2,000 years ago, is 6 meters underground, right? So what if we were to construct a platform that is 6 meters above ground, where we can stand from the point of view of somebody who's 2,000 years from the future, right? And this idea of excavating air to excavate time, and to stand on a datum where we can view what the world must look like from a couple of thousand years in the future, made me think about this kind of reflection of past, future, kind of future archaeologist. I mean, the science fiction work within the spaceship didn't end with these kinds of relationship with the ground or time and space. It weirdly also has something to do with sustainability, right? As a spaceship, as a closed loop, you would have to really harvest your human waste to grow things. And in 2021, I had an opportunity to actually write a short story for eFlux, which is published. So you're welcome to check it out if you like. But the flip side of science fiction, I would argue, is political fiction. Okay, what is political fiction? Comics in newspapers is a way to make fun of politicians, right? Political cartoon is a way to, let's say, voice one's displeasure or discontent or opinions about the status quo, to exaggerate and hyperbolize the status quo, right? To depict the normalcy, but exaggerate it in such a way where you make a statement, you make a cultural and political commentary through comics. I believe that is one of the functions of comics, right? And so to write a political fiction, like here we were hired by the Downtown Los Angeles Business Improvement District, which is a semi-private, semi-public group that asked us to help with the urban analysis, right? So we were hired to produce drawings to perform an urban analysis of downtown Los Angeles. Here, we used our, point of view of political fiction to think about what was happening in our city at the time. In 2020, 2021, during COVID, maybe this was also covered here in Taiwan, an African-American individual in the United States named George Floyd was murdered by a white policeman, right? I don't know if you guys remember this. And people were so upset at what had happened. People took it to the streets. People took it to the streets. You know what people didn't do? People didn't take it to the public square. We had the public square in downtown Los Angeles called the Pershing Square, which is designed to be a civic infrastructure. In a time of political upheaval, this is supposed to be the type of infrastructure that platforms political debates between citizens, right? However, it was not used because people took it to the streets. People used the vehicular infrastructure doubled as civic infrastructure, right? And so, it was this type of urban analysis that we performed to highlight, the existing conditions of where we live, the realities of where we are, including COVID, right? Like we were probably similar to Taipei, I'm not really sure, but in downtown Los Angeles anyway, the occupancy level dropped below 50% for some of the commercial buildings, right? People were moving out. And this is really scary for a lot of the people who own the buildings. But we were wondering, what if we were to visualize the solid void relationship of the occupied versus not occupied spaces and re-recognize the city that we're in, and maybe since these spaces are no longer occupied, is there a way for us to, provide some degree of leniency on zoning and building code so that people programmatically can do something that was not designed for what the buildings are supposed to do, and thus revitalizing downtown Los Angeles, right? Along this series of urban analysis we produced, this one is much closer to my heart, not just because it looks like a bunch of spaceships, but also for some of you who may be familiar with Los Angeles, especially downtown Los Angeles, you then would know so many people live on the streets, okay? So many people are homeless, so many, it's unbelievable. It also means that Los Angeles, the second largest city of the United States, one of the wealthiest it is the wealthiest country in the world, the second largest city in the wealthiest country in the world, and has this degree of wealth gap, right? Literally, people are on the streets while there are penthouses, roof bars, private clubs that are inaccessible by the people. It is in this kind of, let's say, collapse of a geopolitical position, the co-occupation of a geography that is only accessible by some and not accessible by the people who live down here, right? It is as though we're surrounded by a city of antisocial spaceships in Los Angeles, right? By the way, here, just going back to the political cartoon that we didn't design anything, right? In fact, in none of these drawings did we design anything. We simply remodeled the buildings that are there and turned off the middle. In Rhino, we just turned off the middle as to make a political statement. But the type of political cartoon, sometimes, so for example, I'll just walk through this one story, which is truly in the form of a comic book, right? So here you can see a man who's making a tie, packing, saying goodbye to his wife, getting on a train, meeting a scientist with a lab coat, and they get into this elevator, and they get into this very, very long elevator ride, and they start to have a conversation within the elevator ride. And the scientist says, remember in 2009 when they completed Burj Khalifa, the tallest building in the world at the time, 800 meters? People were asking, how high can we go? Where would it be? And what would it look like? So in this reality, the question of how high can we go is answered by when we run out of air, which is roughly 12 kilometers into the sky, right? So here you can faintly make out the skyline of Manhattan, because this building is the extrusion of Central Park for 12 kilometers. So extruding Central Park for 12 kilometers also meant that this volume had the capacity for roughly 89 million people, which is roughly the size of Germany. Imagine, no longer are we talking about a city inside of a building. We're talking about a political entity, an economic and political entity, a state inside of a building, right? 89 million people. It reverses the figure ground condition of Manhattan. It forces zoning to be done in section, as well as housing typology to be developed in section in order to respond to cloud conditions, freeing the rest of the land for animals to reclaim. And so they get to the top of the building, and the scientist says, as you know, it is physically impossible to live this high. It is physically impossible to live at this level of 12 kilometers without air. You are the experiment. Stay here for a year, right? Stay here for a year while his wife waits, while birds won't fly any higher. He says, if you survive, we'll keep building. Out of the story, I'll spare you the details, but out of this, similar to the spaceship rotation room, as well as the future archaeologist platform, out of the tall skyscraper Babel story, I was able to pull out an opportunity to construct a moment of the political fiction. This project was called the Briefcase House. It's where I live for about 6 years, right? So here you can also see this is roughly the beginning of my office, Bureau Spectacular. Inside the Briefcase House, I live with Helvetica, my cat, who sadly passed away. So it was, 5 or 6 really productive years of living in a house inside of a house, right? Now, when I finished this project, I was asking myself, oh, cool, did I just do architecture? Is this architecture? My answer was, no, this is not architecture. This is too small to be architecture, but too large to be furniture. A super furniture, which is an in-between typology, an in-between scale that my office worked on time and again. For example, the first retail store we did in Los Angeles was this deconstructing jigsaw puzzle super furniture. Within the staircase contained things like the fitting room, cash register, display shelves, and so on and so forth. Or about 2 years ago, I did this kind of indoor, half-finished office urbanism. But to say all this as a concluding moment of my introduction, right? Like the body of work that I've done in the past, again, cartoons about architecture and cartoonish architecture, it allowed me to build really wonderful things. You know, for example, I did a cartoonish architecture for Coachella a few years ago, and it wouldn't be possible if I didn't really stick to this project. All right, let's talk about my recent work. Okay, since 2022, 5 buildings and art. By this point, you might be wondering, okay, this guy, is he an architect? Does he make buildings? I'm happy to report the answer is yes. I make buildings. Recently, we completed a project. It's a ground up duplex residential project, right? In Southern California, in a small city right outside of Los Angeles, called Bellflower. How I came to know this client was that he was a neighbor, and he was just asking, "Oh, could you draft? Like, do you know like AutoCAD or something? Can you draft like? Can you just make me a stupid box? I have no budget. I have such low budget. Just make me a stupid box, please." So we delivered a stupid box. This is a, as I mentioned, a duplex where there are 2 units, left and right, 2 mirroring units with 4 strips in plan, 4 strips, 2 private strips and 2 public strips, right? Which eventually the proportion of this geometry became a square, again, a stupid box. However, we further subdivided the strips in plan into strips of elevation, right? More specifically, strips of interior elevation. By deconstructing the interior elevation, because you know, what better way to understand somebody's lifestyle or the slices of life by taking a closer look at ways in which program is distributed through the interior elevation, and by slotting it back together, you know, these strips of plans and strips of elevations became this way for us to understand not just a programmatic organization, and not just tanks, right? This is a precast concrete septic tank company who had a bunch of septic tanks sitting in the yard. Septic tank 就是划分词。Okay. So I asked them for their full catalog. You know, what gaps to expand and contract programmatic availability, and what if the cores in themselves also, you know, we anticipate a kind of interaction, circulation, like almost like an urban, it would contain a kind of urban function within the neighborhood. And what if in section we see these kinds of cores, you know, to be at times so fat that they absorb certain functions that do not require natural lighting. So these were some of the thoughts that we had, you know, and maybe by stuffing the stupid cores inside of a typical plan, we can also create seemingly pretty abnormal spaces. And you know, maybe it's also part of the PTSD of dealing with clients that want normal boxes, right? What if I deliver a stupid box, but inside of a bunch of stupid monsters? It's just a box. This is the 5th building project I'm currently working on since 2022. It's a building, this is the existing building in Minnesota, right? It's in Minnesota. So if you're familiar with the Jeffersonian grid of the United States, this is north and south, like precisely north-south. The group that we were connected to they're a minority of minority. This is a Muslim group from India, right? India in itself is not a Muslim country, and this is a group from the Gujarat region of India who moved to Minnesota, meaning they're a minority of a minority, right? And meaning also roughly 20 family use this building, this existing building of roughly 350 square meters. Yeah, there you go, 350 square. So it's not huge, right? And they want to double the area of this project since their community has grown. They want to double it, right? But as I looked into the interior of the existing usage, this image right here really struck me, right? The drop ceiling maintains the north-south Jeffersonian grid, right? Let's just call this the grid of taxes, right? Like they pay taxes, they're citizens of Minnesota, the grid of taxes. This here though, this is the grid of God, right? 5 times a day, they have to pray in the direction of Mecca. They now have, I guess, technology is so advanced that they're able to use an app to find Mecca. And so this is pretty precise, right? This is exactly the direction of Mecca, 5 times. So the awkwardness of the superimposition of these 2 grids is really what struck me and what really caught my attention. And therefore, as we were tasked to double the size of this building, we proposed a box that finds Mecca, that is pointing in the direction of Mecca. So where we are right now, we're still in schematic design, but and there's a chance that this won't get passed by the local jurisdiction, the local codes. We're working on it. These are the kinds of things that we've been working on, entering competitions. This is actually a competition we entered in Taiwan, which we failed. Or designing houses that doesn't get built, over the years. But I'm happy to report that some things are getting built, and it's taken such a long time. But especially in the past 2 years, we're working on 5 buildings and one art, right? But what about the future? 5 books and a documentary. The first book I am working on is called A Book of Monsters, right? A Book of Monsters. What's going on here? Taiwan is a funny place to be from because the mixture of Chinese and Japanese influences, like this type of iconography was always around me when I was a kid. My dad, at home, we just had, this is in Japanese yokai, right? Like the types of monsters that would show up. The medieval mythology of Japan, where evil is personified into these kinds of woodland creatures. Is it evil? Because where I've concluded is that I think monster is simply a device for the society to define normal. Like when somebody behaves outside of normalcy, we need a visual representation of monsters because they're behaving outside of normal, right? It's just that, and we can draw a straight line between this tradition of graphic representation to contemporary manga and anime, right? Pokemon, Pocket Monster, right? It's just that somehow the monsters got cute over time, and what is supposed to be evil also got really charismatic over time. And the postures of these charismatic beings, I have to say, maybe a tiny bit of Taiwan has never really left me because I as a kid I read these things and it's somehow in my work, if you look closely enough. It's somehow in my work consistently. I'm always thinking about this. By the way, was a birdhouse we did for the Brooklyn Botanic Garden, which was also a monster. Where this structure was a musical instrument. We collaborated with a musician in front of the City Hall of Los Angeles. Or even these kinds of AR, VR monsters that we did, also for the same business improvement district. Somehow, let's say the evil or cute monsters are always sort of with us, to a point where if I go back to the spaceship, without gravity, the shape of buildings really look like things you can recognize out of clouds, and an interesting plan may result in a boring elevation, or an interesting section may result in an unusable plan. This idea of the readable, the recognizable, I'm going to fast forward the readable and recognizable. If you think, I don't know if any of you are seeing a tiny man with a beard inside of the cat's ear. If you see it, you're not crazy. You're not imagining it, okay? Because if you see it, do you see it? If you see it, you, like me, suffer from a condition called pareidolia. Every Homo sapien has it. Every Homo sapien. The reason why we have it is because we are so hardwired to read people's faces. Because unlike unlike Neanderthals, we are very good at forming social relationships. We know who's a friend or an enemy, right, by looking at their faces, right? It is so hardwired within us. When we see a pile of rocks, we not only see some human, we assign gender and character to a pile of rocks, okay? It really doesn't take much for let's say personality to emerge out of a composition. And the reason why I believe a monster can be, I'm just gonna fast forward quite a bit because I don't wanna exhaust you guys. I believe composition, posture, and personality can communicate personality. Body language, right? There is a thing about body language. Like if I go like this, I have a very different body language than if I go like this. These are things that we read. So much so that one of the cartoons about architecture that I drew was about this person who kills a deer, takes the skin, covers himself under the skin, and dances for somebody else, right? And as he dances, the abstraction of his body becomes a series of shapes, a tiny skyline of personalities. Again, all this is part of the Book of Monster project as a book, and even the Coachella project we did. How do I do a thing where, if I in art history terms, it would be contrapposto. If I go like this, I'm exuding a kind of relaxation. But this leg is the load-bearing member. It means that my other leg is non-load-bearing. What I'm trying to say is, even posture becomes a structural problem. And in my collaboration with my structural engineer, we've come to realize we really need to think about funny postures structurally, right? If we think of these things structurally, we can, these are some of the things I want to include into the Book of Monsters. And these are some of the other collaborators I want to work with in this book. I'm currently working on another monster inside of inside of a company's lobby. And it's about to finish in the next month. Actually, I'm gonna start skipping some of these books because it's just too much. I think I've been working on a documentary series. We wrote 10 episodes already about Taiwanese architecture. This Steve Chen person is a filmmaker living in Taipei, and we've been thinking about who to talk to. Some people are very established. This is probably really recognizable for everybody, right? Hong Seung-yun. Or like new practices that people don't recognize. And maybe we can figure out a way to do a documentary. I'm just starting to feel like I need to hurry up.
We have plenty of time.
Okay. I don't want to lose her. I've been teaching core. These are from my teaching at USC, right? So first year graduate students, we do these kinds of one-to-one construction project. It really begs the question: how do you teach core, right? What happens when you introduce somebody to architecture? Like, what are some of the things that you emphasize, or some of the things that you omit? And I think as an educator, it's really important to me to think about how core is taught today in the middle of the, quarter point of the 21st century. This last book, this is not the last book. This fourth book I've been working on is called A Post-Zoom Society, with a Dutch philosopher named Timotheus Vermeulen. During COVID, I wrote this essay for Log, where I was talking about the review culture on Zoom, right? Review cultures on Zoom is really strange, because some people turn off the camera, some people, you judge them right away based on their background. All of you are probably familiar with Zoom teaching and Zoom learning. It's sort of a terrible thing to do because, suddenly your home becomes an office, right? Every time you turn on Zoom, you're everything becomes office, right? The kitchen's an office, the bedroom's an office, the bathroom's an office, dining room's an office. And when you think about what's behind you, this philosopher that I've been working with, he primarily focuses on media theory. So for him, anything that's on the screen, including Zoom, is a movie. And because each and every one of us, all of us, are the main characters of our own movies. And there comes a time when we share the screen as our collective narratives collapse onto a flat screen, right? So these are the kinds of conversations I've been having with Timotheus, again, including the idea of the limits of the backdrop. Maybe if you judge somebody before they speak, is it because you don't trust them right away based on what's behind them, or you trust them immediately because of what's behind them? So, taking Zoom seriously as a medium has been, is one of the future projects I'm working on, that I've been working on for the past couple of years. The very last book I've been developing is this project titled Citizens with No Places, as a follow-up to my previous book, Citizens of No Place, right? Citizens of No Place, here, no place, talks about utopia, right? Like utopia, the word utopia today is often used in the context of idealism, right? Ideal place. However, the etymological root of the word utopia is more about no place. It's a placeless place for people to perform thought experiments. No place, okay? So Citizens of No Place was a, let's say, utopian exploration of what it means to be in a spaceship or be in a building that's 12 kilometers tall, right? However, this follow-up, Citizens with No Places, it's more about life in downtown Los Angeles. It's really all this, right? I'm surrounded by all this. When I lived in downtown Los Angeles for about 8 years, and I'm surrounded by this every single day, right? You're surrounded by this so much that one becomes desensitized to suffering, and I just couldn't really bear to think of it anymore. And there are all these organizations that work on helping people. Does the government help? Kind of. But not very effectively, because people continue to be on the streets. And I was thinking, architects, if we can't solve it, can we use our skills to understand it, right? Like graphically, we more than anybody can make diagrams and understand. We look at our city very differently, right? We more than anybody can, at the very minimum, verbatim document what's out there and see how life is lived and what types of urban conditions are conducive for congregation, what types of proportions do people look for when they live out there. There are, so all these books, there are a couple of publishers, including Axiomatic Editions and Moss Context that I'm working with. Hopefully these 5 books would come out in the next 7 to 10 years. All right, this is towards the end. As I promised, the end is an epilogue, okay? And where I'm just gonna tell one more story, and then that's it. Just one more. One Wilshire is a real building in downtown Los Angeles, right? It looks like an office building. It looks like an office building because it was designed as an office building in 1972 by SOM. So SOM designed this building where layers upon layers of humans did paperwork, right, in an office. Paperwork where they extracted data out of the paperwork and they stored it, archived it, right? However, in the late 20th century, early 21st century, when real estate in downtown Los Angeles plummeted so much that it made more financial sense for One Wilshire to turn itself into a, what do you call that, server farm, right? This is now a giant server where data is stored and processed and transferred through this, right? Meaning the human office workers that process data is now replaced in this building by robots that continues to look like a human office building. So One Wilshire, the building, is inside the skyline of downtown Los Angeles, which is inside of this window. This window is inside of this room, which is inside of this model. This model is inside of this photo shoot, which is inside of this computer. This computer is inside of an office, which is inside of this file. This file is inside of a network of files, which is inside of this server. The server is inside of a network of servers, inside of One Wilshire. All right, thank you very much.
I feel like I want to go back to architecture school and study again. It's so inspirational, and so I think we have time for a few questions. You can do it in Chinese. 用中文问都可以哈。同学、老师们有什么问题，欢迎。请说。Okay. Actually, pass around the microphone. Okay. I can give. 随意说说吧。
It's really inspirational, and I think your cartoonish architecture seems like riding on the flow of the cartoonish fashion of the modern art fiction. Yeah, and I was thinking that your monsters and you said that the monster architecture concept is very interesting, but I was thinking if it is possible to make it more organic, it's because in my side it's like a biomimetics. You know, it's a kind of biomimetics architecture, like you know, some magnetic function 学 you know. Yeah, so I was thinking if it's possible to make it more organic, more spiritual, or not that so cold, so materialistic. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think some of the students who I was on a review of probably heard me talk about stuff like this. And it's just personal taste, right? Like this is just my personal taste. I like low resolution things. I like low resolution things. I think biomimicry becomes too high. The resolution is too high. And it's just a matter of personal taste. I recognize it when it happens, and I think it's actually really nice when people can do it well. I don't do it well, and therefore I don't do it. I do low resolution things. Yeah.
Thank you.
同学们要问了，其实he's a dentist. Come over. This is especially for your
Thank you for coming. I do deal with bones. Check out the bones. Look at the bones.
Okay, then if you guys are too shy to ask, 如果大家太害羞的话，我来问一个问题。I have a question. I feel like you have endless imagination and this eager to explore something out of daily life. Does it come before you study architecture, or it comes after you study architecture?
I didn't study architecture right away. I think in the United States, and Canada, it's a little different. You could study something else and go for graduate school in architecture. So that's what I did. My undergraduate was let's say a bunch of nonsense, right? I studied, it was like Bachelor of Arts. So I had cinema studies, sociology. My favorite department was the history and philosophy of technology, which is such a fascinating department. My favorite class from that department was about trebuchet, like, you know, the medieval military. So they focused on medieval France, but the class like ranged from the advent of armed tools in the 9th century to eventually crossbows and gunpowder, and you know, like it was such a fascinating collection of, like, again, I say nonsense because it was just so ranged. I wasn't very focused on doing architecture in my undergrad. But maybe it's a blessing in disguise. Like I just look at the world the same way still, right? I still feel like, I watch a movie. I remember some of the classes I took in cinema studies. And I don't just follow the narrative. I look at the structure of the narrative and all these things. And then I overanalyze it. I just overanalyze the movie. What happens whenever I watch a movie. Or anything, like when I see it, just bits and pieces of the world, I just overanalyze it and overthink it. But lucky for me, once I found architecture, I had a channel to output the overthinking. Yeah. So in a way, it happened before architecture. Yeah.
So allow me to interpret it in Chinese.
Okay.
所以我觉得赖老师讲的，我觉得是一个很有趣的观点。有时候我们人有充满了各式各样的想法，学习什么，但是你到底怎么样把你的这些充满了想象力的创造力跟观察力的事情，来到真实的世界，透过建筑的学习。所以似乎建筑是一个很棒的事情，让我们本来在世界上好像这样不飒飒聊聊冲想，在这边找到一个超棒的圈哦，然后对世界上对这个世界还有很有趣的反应，让跟大家产生对话这样子。I hope I translate that OK。如果说大家不好意思场上问，等一下我们conclude之后要现在问的。你们现在问的好处是其他同学听得到哦，你们等一下私下问的好的那个是其他同学就听不到，有点可惜。OK。
So I'm curious about that. Recent year, AI techniques growing so fast, and we would like to use these techniques in your team and in your work, and why you want to use it and how you use it.
The question is about AI.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just my curiosity.
Okay. No, it's a good question. I think about it all the time. AI, right? Artificial intelligence. Okay. Because I believe in natural stupidity. And I think if you rely on artificial intelligence, right? Of course, it is natural stupidity of a human brain that would be thinking about such illogical things. And the world requires illogical things to be thought through. Instead of I will not be relying on artificial intelligence. Perhaps I will use it to generate some images for me to crop or borrow the texture or collage out of it. I haven't really used it in any of these projects. I might. I personally don't really like the rendering style of AI. I think it looks pretty, for my personal taste, I think it's pretty ugly. I also, for my personal taste, when I read an AI essay, I also think it doesn't read very well. Like, it kind of freaks me out. So I haven't really, even, like right now I'm writing a lot of recommendation letters, okay? The natural thing for me to do is just let a machine do it. But I can't because it just doesn't read like a stupid person. I hope that's not a bad answer to your question, but I will only rely on AI for aspects of things, but I will always rely on the stupidity of an illogical human brain.
Anyone else? Okay, that's one. 你们可能10年内没有机会再听到赖老师演讲了，所以有机会的话，这个是真的是非常难得的机会。
Professor Lai, let me begin by saying that I think I can say for all of us we were pretty inspired by your work, especially today how you, I think a lot of your products, I would say, or your works are very much, it challenges the notion of what it is to be, let's say, using your, maybe let's say buildings as a political statement, or maybe using things that challenges the notion of what it is to be bounded by an imaginary sort of grid. So I think, and I was, maybe if I could ask, if maybe let's say in like a setting like Taipei, for example, how everything is quite functional, how everything is quite gridlocked, and everything is quite, I would say, more of in a blockade kind of like facade. I was thinking maybe if you see how your sort of ideals or your sort of concepts may be integrated into this kind of like society, maybe in the upcoming future, or maybe I don't know, or do you have any like maybe personal opinions on that?
Taipei is changing a lot. I mean, I don't come back to Taipei that much, right? Like I'm from Taichung, like my family's there, so when I come back, I'm not really here. But because I've been here a lot, and I really love Taipei. It's such a vibrant city. It's so much fun. I mean, there are a lot of things to love about Taipei. Like I really love. I mean, you guys are. I don't know if you're from Taipei, so you take it for granted. But the small nooks behind the main streets, like the super tiny like the super tiny gaps, these kinds of urban cracks where a funny shop lives in, or maybe there's a boutique kind of fashion store. Like pockets of subculture is sprinkled all over these tiny gaps in Taipei. Taipei is amazing. I just love it. But the thing I wanted to say is, Taipei has also changed a lot. Not so much just the buildings, like there are new buildings being built in Taipei, but I'm especially encouraged after the past 2.5 days because the people have changed. The people have changed. You guys are different from the people I knew. Like basically all of you that I was on reviews with, right? You're different from the young people I knew. Which is so encouraging for me. Like I think as people change, this relationship with rigid mindset of like bureaucratic gridlock, that will change in time. I can see it. I don't see how Taipei will stay conservative for that long. I don't think so. I just can't see it because I don't think people in this room. I mean, many of you who will become important decision makers of the city, right? I don't think you'll let Taipei be boring. So I think it's going to be great. Yeah.
Maybe one more questions?
Okay.
Hi, teacher. I'm wondering that all these monsters and science fictional system that you come up with based on your social observations, when you put into the actual site, do people challenge you that is lack of interaction or corresponding with the surroundings, or do it's put into the actual site are had nothing to do with the surroundings there?
The answer is yes. Always, yes. Lots of people hate my work for sure.
Okay.
Not a problem, but I don't really care.
I like that answer.
Yeah, if they don't like it, that's not my problem. That's their issue. No, but I think. By the way, I have this up right now because you may not recognize this, but the buildings below are in Dongchu. I don't know if that's visible. Like this is one block in Dongchu, and I was working with the Ministry of Culture of Taiwan, 文化部嘛. I was suggesting to them, like, what if we were to take the illegal construction above normal buildings in Taiwan, like Weijin? What if we were to take that not as a problem, but as a feature? And if the illegal construction becomes part of the fabric of the city, and we just kind of put it next to, above, within, between, beyond, I just wanted to show this animation, also partially because of the previous question, right? What do people say? Does it work? No, it doesn't work. And that's not the point for this one. But there are also but because I'm now getting stuff built, I'm also starting to, balance the moments where I know it's not meant to be working and the moments where it is supposed to be working. And these are maybe different applications of the types of work. right? Sometimes it's there to make a statement, but other times it's there to be realized. And I just need to pick my battles. Yeah. But I think this is also back to all of you as well. You're young. You know, when people are younger, I mean, I'm not super old, but I think I'm getting to a point where I'm able to not care if somebody doesn't like my work. But when you're young, it's harder to not care, right? It's harder. Like, in fact, it hurts probably when somebody tells you, oh, your work is bad, then it hurts your feelings. So this stuff will also take time, but I think, you know, as long as you don't give up, you just keep going, and maybe out of 10 people, I think, you know, out of 10 people, I think along my journey, for every 10 people, probably 6 to 8 people didn't like what I do, or didn't believe it. And it's then up to me to keep going, right? So or it's up to you to keep going. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for letting me be with you in the last 2 or 3 days.
That's thanks, Professor Lai again. Okay. Thank you. It's really great, our great honor. Thanks.